If you watch my last video, this first part of this video is going to make more sense. Today, we're going to kind of cover a topic I touched on last video. I've been kind of losing sleep on it because I feel like I left a lot of holes. I just kind of glazed over it real quick. And I just don't want to be misinforming anybody or make people think that I'm saying one thing when really I'm saying something else. So we're going to cover that, and then we're going to build a pickup I've never made before. It's a custom order, so it's all wound. I just have to basically assemble it. So we'll do that, and that'll be this video. I also got a little cool vintage surprise for the end. So let's get into it. All right, so like I mentioned in the intro of this video regarding the previous video, in that video I mentioned briefly about how I was talking about how the tone, the guitar tone isn't in the pickups. What I was saying was that the pickups are part of the recipe, and that a lot of the sonic core character came from the guitar. But the way I worded it, I just went over it so quick, and I left a lot of holes that made it sound, at least the way when I listened back, I was kind of scared that maybe someone would take it as what I'm saying is none of the tone comes from the pickups, it all comes from the guitar. And that's also false. What I meant was to say that to explain that, you know, some people believe that all of the sound comes from this, right? So you take the pickups out of one guitar and put it into a completely different guitar, and it'll still sound the same because all the tones of the pickups. That's wrong. So I was trying to counter that and set people on a more correct path. If I were a salesman and I wanted to build my pickup business into this big empire where I'm rich and someone else is winding pickups for me and all that, then I would tell you that the tone is all in these. But I'm not like that. I want to be 100% truthful based on my findings, my experience, my travels down many rabbit holes that is guitar and pickups. I want to make sure that you make the best informed and unbiased decision on whether you'll buy pickups or not, whether you need upgrade pickups or not, and which ones sound like they'd be best, whether they're mine or they're someone else's or they're some big companies or whatever. Really what this is about is you and what you need and what you want, the viewer. And I want to make sure that I help guide you down the right path for you, not necessarily for me. I go for my path based on what I need for what I want and what I get and make and wind and all that. So to go backtrack to that, I generalized on the P.A.F. spec pickups. So in my case, they're 59ers, but you could have Lawler Imperials, you could have Seymour Duncan 59s or the I'm blanking on the name, the Seth Lovers, you know, the Gibson stuff like the Custom Buckers, Burst Buckers, all the P.A.F. spec. I was kind of generalizing around those. So what I was getting at was you're getting a lot of the guitar's sound through the amp. The pickup acts more like an EQ filter booster kind of thing, but it's very minimal, really. The guitar's core sound, tone, character will come through, but the pickup filters certain things and maybe boosts a few things to change it a little bit. But it doesn't really do much as far as the tone. Well, it does, but not as much as you would think. It's a lot more subtle of a thing when you're looking at a P.A.F., for example. So a lot of the guitar is going to come through, and what the pickup does, if you get a hotter wound P.A.F., it's going to interact with an amp, especially a tube amp, differently than a lower output P.A.F. So with different specs within the P.A.F. range, like different outputs and magnets and you know, DC resistance and inductance and all that, you can alter the way that the guitar and the amp interact and how it comes out the amp. So it's part of the tone, right? But you could take that same set of pickups and put it in a different Les Paul or in a PRS single cut or another Les Paul style guitar. You're going to get that guitar's character through the amp with that pickup. So that's what I meant by when I said this one is brighter in the top end and has tighter low end than this one. This one's got bigger, fatter low end, and the top end is smoothed out because the low end and the mids are more prominent, which takes away from the treble. So if I took these pickups and put in that one, they would still sound pretty much, it would be the same result because the specs in these pickups are about the same. Take these pickups and put in this guitar, you would still get brightness and tighter low end. That's sort of what I was getting at, but made it seem like all pickups are all like that, right? So, and that's not entirely true. So here's a 508, right? This is one of mine. We actually wound these, different one, but on another video. This is what I would call a modern high output pickup. So this will change drastically the way that guitar or that guitar or that guitar or whatever guitar interacts with the amp I'm playing through. So typically with this, you get tight lows, high resistance, high inductance, and you get, you retain a lot of brightness. So it has a lot of edge to this, but it pushes. So normally like with a P.A.F., if you overwind it, you're starting to lose the lows, you're getting more, lose the highs, and you're getting more lows, and it's pushing the front end of the amp. So if you have a tube amp that reacts to input volume and starts to break up more, right? An overwound P.A.F. will push it into more gain. Like say like a Marshall or, that kind of stuff. Like if you have a Fender Tweed that like to, you could push the front end of that and you get more crunch out of it. So, but with a P.A.F., you overwind it, you lose highs, and then you get lows. And in a metal setting, a lot of times the lows get too muddy and the highs are not there. So you have to compensate by turning the treble up on the amp in presence and try to get that edge back. But it never really quite gets there. So the purpose of these is tightens the low end. You keep your treble edge, but then it also has the resistance and the inductance and stuff pushing the amp into higher gain. Now, where this has a great effect with modern high gain amps, there's a lot of them when you get into the gain that you might, like if you're playing with a lot of gain, you start turning it up, you'll notice that it starts to get woolly and you lose that percussive edge on every pick hit. And where a pickup like this really shines is you can turn the gain down a bit on the amp so that you get to the point where it's not woolly, you keep that edge, but just right where it's about to get into that. And then you throw in this pickup and it tightens that low end, brightens the top end, you get that edge with the tight low end. So, and it's pushing the amp into that gain that as if you had the gain knob a bit higher. So you get that modern tight edge gain sound with the high gain and everything without having to fight it by trying to overcompensate with the amp when the amp is already doing so much, right? So that's what this kind of stuff does. Now, will it make these guitars sound different with this? Absolutely. You'll still get the character of the guitar. So in this guitar, you're going to get more lows and less, smoother highs and more mid-range than this guitar. Every guitar is different. The tone isn't entirely in the pickup, and the pickup, you're more or less changing the way that the guitar interacts with the amp. So that's where changing pickups or upgrading pickups to something else or whatever is where it really comes into play, where it's really necessary is when you don't have the right pickup to do the right thing that you want with the amp that you play and the guitar that you have. I'm hoping this is making more sense. Basically, I just want to make sure that people don't think that all of the tone is in this and none in this, because it really does. If you were to put any humbucker, like let's say, well, this is a 558, so it's kind of like a modern spec, but heavily influenced by the P.A.F. Kind of like a P.A.F., but a little more modern. The pole spacing on this one is 50 millimeters instead of 49.2 millimeters. So it's not P.A.F. correct, but it's wound to have a similar output and that kind of thing. So let's say we took this and put it in the Les Paul. It'll probably sound pretty P.A.F.-ish, maybe a little hotter because it is just a touch hotter. But if you put it in a Strat, so let's say I take the pickguard out of this Strat and get an HSS and put this in the bridge, or even get an HH, let's say, and put two of these neck and bridge. It's not going to sound like a Les Paul. Or if I get a P.A.F. from one of these 59er sets in this Strat, it's not going to sound like one of these Les Pauls. It's still going to sound like the Strat with a humbucker, with a P.A.F. spec pickup. And there's a lot of factors in that. Wood has a factor, and not so much the species necessarily. It's just that chosen slab of wood for the body, that chosen slab for the neck, that chosen slab for the fretboard, glued together, and how it resonates together, right? And maple neck, rosewood fretboard, and I think that's either alder, might be poplar body, right? Versus maple top, mahogany back, mahogany neck, rosewood fretboard, right? They resonate different. And so you have the string and it does its thing when you hit it, and it's anchored at the saddle and the nut. And some people think that that's all that matters is the string vibrating between those 2 points. But what they're not factoring in is the fact that energy is being absorbed into the guitar through the nut and through the bridge posts, through the bridge saddle, bridge posts. And it's also, the strings are also anchored in this case, in the stop bar, right? And its posts. So it's got 3 points in a Les Paul where the energy of the string vibrating absorbs into the body and the body resonates, which in turn affects, because it loops back and it re-affects the string. So that's how you're getting this Les Paul sounding different acoustically than this one, and the one in the closet, the one over there, and the one across the street, and the one down the road, right? Same guitar, same woods, but they all vibrate different because no two slabs of mahogany ring quite the same, right? You knock it when it's properly dried, you knock it, you get it. If you look up PRS videos, Paul Reed Smith taking up neck blanks and knocking them, they all have a different note. And then, you could have the same species of wood, 5-10 blocks, they're all going to have different notes. And same with the bodies and all that. You glue it all together, and then it kind of creates like a resonance chord, sort of, right? So, if you play a chord and you play a wrong note within the chord, it's dissonant and, doesn't sound right. Well, it's the same thing with the vibrations of the resonance, the vibration of the wood, right? If they're not really vibrating in pitches that are in harmony with them, you might cancel each other out. So that's why you get some guitars, like you can get 10 Les Pauls. I keep using Les Pauls, but any guitar, but we'll just use Les Pauls. You have 10 of them. They're all going to sound different acoustically. Some of them you're going to feel on your body, the body vibrating on you more than others. And that's all the wood, right? The energy of the string going into the wood through those anchor points. And then in turn, it affects the way that, the wave of the string while it's vibrating. And that's what the pickup is picking up. But also, they're all somewhat microphonic. If they're wax potted, maybe less so. If they're P.A.F.s, if they're made correctly, for example, my 59ers, they're non-potted unless ordered with that spec in mind. Like if you want them potted, I'll pot them. But generally speaking, a P.A.F. is not potted. So should anybody selling a P.A.F. style or P.A.F. spec pickup shouldn't be potted as stock. And when they're not potted, they're a little more, they're more microphonic than something that's wax potted. But even the wax potted ones, they're slightly microphonic. So you're sort of picking up the acoustics of the guitar as well as the vibration of the string altering the magnetic field. So it kind of acts like a pickup and a ribbon mic, sort of. So that you're getting more of that acoustic sound of the guitar. So I think that's a large part of where the guitar's core tone still comes through the amp, no matter what pickups you're using. What I'm getting at is a Strat is not going to vibrate and resonate the same as a Les Paul. And that Strat won't do the same as my other Strat, which I can't really show right now because I can't turn the camera. But I have two Strats, the seafoam green one and this white one. One has a maple neck fretboard. It's all one piece, not a glued slab. And this one is rosewood. These two Strats sound acoustically different. And they're both Strats. They're both constructed the same. They sound different, right? So the character comes through the amp, through the pickup, the character of the guitar. Pickup filters it so you can change the highs, the EQ of it, right? If you want more lows, more mids, more highs, more push out of it, more gain out of the amp. So the 2 points on this Strat, right? So you look at Strats, for example, the ball end is in a steel, or, it could be pot metal, whatever, depending on the Strat, right? It could be brass. They're in a block under the trim, right? So you got the trem plate with the saddles, and then you get like a block, right? And this whole thing pivots, right? So the string's vibration is being absorbed into the bridge, into that block, and then so in a Strat, like a vintage style Strat, there's 6 screws, pivot screws. Modern ones, there'll be 2 pivots, or like if you have a Floyd Rose, there's the 2 pivots. But the vibrations go through the bridge, through those posts into the body, and then again at the nut, right? So that's how it absorbs in a Strat. So that's why typically Strats are not super loud acoustically compared to let's say in this, like a Les Paul, right? Some are. When you go vintage too, they got those, just the wood, the body, like the wood of the body just aged and dried, and it resonates more than it did probably when it was new. Just like new ones in 30 years, they'll probably resonate different than they did when they were new. But generally speaking, Strats are quieter unplugged when played acoustically than a Les Paul. And I think that's why is it's not absorbing as much through the body. You're going to get some spring sound. You ever pluck a Strat acoustically, and you could sometimes hear the springs in the back cavity for the trem, right? So that's why you can't get a Strat to sound like a Les Paul. You can make it sound like, give it that humbucker sound, but it still sound like that guitar with this humbucker or whatever humbucker you put in, right? So there's that. There's a lot of factors to where the tone really comes from. That's why there's like pedals, amps, guitars, strings, string gauges, pickups, all this stuff that all makes up how you can sculpt your sound through the guitar, and the guitar's character is always going to come through. Another big one is the scale length, right? There's a reason why a Fender has that, what people call like the Fender snap or the Fender spank, the spanky sound of the string, right? There's a Fender sound, and a lot of it has to do with the scale length. I used to have 2 PRS single cuts. I still have one, but I used to have 2. I used to have PRS. I still do, but I used to too, So the one I still have is a 245, so 24.5-inch scale length. And the green one I used to have, which I sold, which was a great guitar, by the way, and it was like 7.5 pounds at most. Like, it was super light. It was a 250, SC 250. So that's 25-inch scale length. And that one, even though I tested my, I R&D'd my 5 series pickups, all the 5 series, 557, 558, 585, 593, which became the 595, and the 506 and 508, which I've discontinued the 506, and we just stick with the 508. But that whole line, I tested through those two PRS single cuts, and all the early sets of all those pickups, I've put back and forth through both guitars to the point where I had to buy new pots because I just cooked them from changing pickups so much, right? That's what happens. But the 245 always had a little more low end, more mid-range honk, and a smoother top end than the 250. The 250 had tighter low end, brighter top end, and it had a very Strat-like snap to the sound, right? To the tone when you're hitting the strings. It had a very Strat-like tone. So when you put it in the neck, especially the neck pickup, and you played the green one, so the SC250, it had a very Fendery sound, not a Gibson sound. It was kind of sort of in between, but you could hear the Fender snap to it. And that was because of the scale length, 25-inch scale length versus 24 and a half. So you look at a Les Paul, which I find is a touch brighter than acoustically, naturally, touch brighter than the SC245 because you're getting a 1/4 inch more length. And I think that makes a difference. Some people might not hear that, but some people will. I certainly did. So that scale length has a big effect on the tone as well. And that's from the guitar, right? So there's a lot of layers and a lot of ingredients to all this. So this is why I wanted to go over this more in detail versus the previous video, because I went really quick and I was afraid that you would think that I was saying that the tone is not in the pickups. It's not entirely in the pickups. The pickups play a big role in how it translates the guitar's tone through the amp. Now, so for a perfect example, so right now, I've got a P90. It's a humbucker sized one, and it will sound different than a P90 because the bobbin is a slightly different dimension. But, if I put P90s in that guitar or this guitar, it'll sound like whichever guitar they're in. Let's say we put P90s in this guitar. It'll sound like that guitar with P90s. So you're going to get that P90 character with this guitar's tone behind it coming through the amp. If I put P90s in the Strat, it's going to sound like a Strat with P90s. So it's going to sound like a Strat, but like hot rodded, like much hotter single coils than what it has here. So that's it, I guess, is the tone is not entirely in the pickups. It's not like the sound of this pickup doesn't necessarily have a tone or a sound. It won't carry in the entirety of the tone with it. It's part of the equation. This is kind of like filtering and EQing whatever it's installed in. EMGs tend to have their own, like their built-in preamp circuit and all this stuff. So it really does have more of an influence on what the sound's going to be, and overpowers, I think, the guitar's natural tone more so than an overwound non-active pickup, passive pickup. So in general, the passive stuff, especially if you go to like vintage spec stuff, vintage output stuff, the guitar is really going to come through. The more you wind it over, now you're filtering more, you're EQing more, you're compressing more, and it's going to change. You're going to alter it more. It's sort of what you might need if you're using a high gain amp and it starts to get flubby or whatever. So that sort of covers it, I think. Let me know if that makes sense. I don't want to sell you on one idea and make you think like, oh, in order to get good tone, you need to upgrade your pickups. No, sometimes it's just the guitar. Maybe you need to upgrade something on the guitar or tune something different, raise or lower the heights of your pickups and try to find sweet spots. But I think with what I talked about in mind here, you might get a more clear idea of whether you need a pickup upgrade or not and what pickups to go for. I'm going to try and keep covering this topic to kind of add more as I think of it. But that's the gist of it. all of it influences it. And in the end, you're running it through, you know, this amp or your amp or his amp or her amp or the amp across the street. The amp has a lot of effect on what the tone will be as well. And even more so than the amp is the speaker, because you change the speaker and it changes the tonality completely different too. So tone is not just in the guitar, but a lot of it is. A lot of it is in the amp, a lot of it is in the speaker. Some of it's in the pickups, or a lot of it's in the pickups, depending on what you're doing with it. It's all ingredients that makes one big sonic dish, let's say. And that's what it is. There's a lot of elements that at play. If you're playing with super high gain, things start to matter a bit less, because now you're getting a lot of it out of the amp and the way that the pickup is interacting with the amp. And then there's your speaker choice. But when you back the gain off, more of it is coming through than just that. So I don't know. I should probably stop talking before I dig myself into another hole and then have to make another video explaining this video. So I'll just shut up now. I'm going to get this pickup ready for assembly. We'll assemble that on tabletop, and then we'll get to that vintage surprise, and then you know, have a weekend. So all right, so we're ready to assemble this. I've got the bobbin all wound and taped up. We got the start and finish lead, so now we just have to mount this to the base plate. I am going to need some thin mahogany spacers. The thickness of the keeper bar is just a touch thicker than the magnet. And instead of sanding this down to thickness, I'm just going to put spacers. Yeah, so first things first, I guess we got to, I got to connect the start wire to ground. So that can easily be done through the base plate. I'm going to do this little corner back here. There you go, that's hooked up. So now we can get the keeper bar and mount the bobbin. Now, I'm not usually this fumbly with my stuff. I usually don't do this with a camera in my face pointing down at where I'm working, so that does make it tricky. Leave that a little loose. All right, this is a bridge pickup, so the lead's going to go this way. Next thing, we'll do the magnets. So it's May 5 magnets. I've marked them for south and north. So if you use this guy, black is south, white is north. So we want south pointing inwards. So as we know, south and south don't attract, north-south does attract. We want the two opposing, like the two souths to push against each other. Just like in a P90, same thing. So we've got the magnet in there. We're just going to slide these little spacers in here. All right, so that should be north, south. South on this side, and I've marked them with markers so I know what sides. What? You slide that sucker in, along with a spacer. Or shim, or whatever you want to call it. And then we can clamp these down. There. So now we got south polarity in the center, and north on the outsides. Now for the pickup, we've already mounted the ground, which is the start. So now the finish, we need to connect to the hot lead. Solder that up. And that should be connected. Next up, we just need to tape that all off. You don't want that part touching the side of this, because then it's going to basically ground itself out. And then we'll just tuck that here, hold that in place with a little bit of tape. And there you go. Next up, I'm going to put pole screws in. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to speed this up so that I don't have to talk through it. And you see the process without having to sit there for 20 minutes. So time to speed her up. All right, so now ready for the cover. It's a matter of lining it all up, pushing it on. All right, then we'll solder the 2 points and it'll be ready for wax potting and boxing up. There you go. I just have to get these adjusted. So in a previous video, I mentioned how I like to radius the heights of the pole screws. And so this is sort of the way I do it here. The idea is to have low E and high E just barely peeking through above the cover, pretty much flush. And then the next one a touch higher, and the next one a touch higher. So I think I can do a half turn on each and it'll be good. There. Looks good. So there it is. So this would be kind of like a 256, 2/56 model, but in a humbucker form. It is a little bit different though. Can't get as much wire as an actual P90 bobbin because it's got to fit into this thing, and P90s are generally a little bit bigger this way. But essentially that's it. And then you just wax pot it, label it, box it up. That's pretty cool. It's a neat looking pickup. So there we go. How cool is that? We made this pickup. We assembled it. You got to come along for the ride on that. And that'll do another week's episode of this silly little show we like to call 59er Winder Show. As promised, we have a little vintage surprise to cap this all off, to get the weekend kicked off. By the time this uploads, it'll probably be Saturday morning, so it's Friday now, but by the time you watch this, it'll probably be Saturday, or maybe not at all. Maybe you won't watch this. But if you are watching this, thanks for coming along for the ride again. For the vintage surprise, we have, since we've been doing 335 stuff lately, and it seems like people like 335s quite a bit. Actually, the video I did of comparing the Epiphone and the Gibson 335s is getting a lot of views for my silly little channel. Which, I'm having fun with this. I'm having fun seeing people watch, and there's a little bit of comments here and there, and slowly but surely we're building something. On the topic of 335s, today I did a setup on this the other day. We have a 1979 Walnut ES-335. You've got the volute, right? And these are the tarbacks. See if I can zoom out a little bit here. Yeah, so these are the tarbacks, the Gibson tarbacks. So I do suspect there's a possible issue with the bridge pickup, but I can't go in there and fix it because it's all caked in this black resin thing. So what are the differences between this and say a newer 335, or probably even the older 335s is the neck is a big one where it's very narrow and very thin. Like it feels like a toothpick over here, and then it fattens up nice down here. Like it's actually quite fat down here. Kind of wish it would kind of carry through to the nut, but it tapers quite a bit in width. Like it gets very narrow and gets very thin. And the other thing is the headstock angle is not as steep. I don't remember the angle, but I believe like the standard Gibson one is 17 degrees, I think. And this is more like the Epiphones, which I think it's 14 degrees. If I'm wrong, let me know, but this is more of like closer to the Epiphone head angle than the Gibson one. It's noticeable as soon as I grab my 335 or the Les Pauls, like the headstock is further back on mine than this. So you got the thin neck, the taper goes really, really narrow and thin, nice and beefy up by the 12th fret. You get the volute, less head angle. You got these nice Grover tuners. And this guitar is, as far as I know, and knowing the customer, this is how he got it. This is bone stock from the factory. Nothing's been changed other than strings. The frets are very, very flat and low, like the fretless Wonder type thing. But it has a really nice acoustic sound. What else about this guitar? Yeah, it's got like a modern, like from the 70s, Nashville style bridge. It has the coil split, and this is where there's something with the bridge pickup, because the circuit is working fine, but the bridge pickup there's something going on with one of the coils, so I gotta talk to him about that. But you have a coil split. So on the neck pickup, we're plugged into the deluxe reverb, no pedals, just straight in. And then push this down to split it. So bridge. So, very nice guitar. It sounds good. If you like narrow necks, these are pretty cool, I guess. I like the fat necks, but this is like really good for small hands, especially down here, and then it fattens up here. But it's still comfortable. If I can remember how to play. That was the neck. Let's go bridge split. Do that awesome chord again. They sound pretty good. The pickups are, I think, a little higher output than you know what you would find especially in a modern 335. They came with the T-types, which are lower output P.A.F. spec. These are a little hotter, probably a stronger magnet and a little warmer. but not muddy. They split well. Once you engage the coil split, they don't lose too much. I don't know what it's going to come, how it's going to come across on the camera. But in the room, the volume drops a little bit, but they don't thin out and get all brittle. Like even the bridge in split. Just playing random chords. Yeah, we can compare this to my 335. Let's do just neck unsplit. Grab the 335. All right, so here's mine. If you're getting into YouTube and you're doing YouTube videos, learn from me, because I'm clearly not learning my own lesson. Tune before you start filming. All right, back to this one. Go back to the old guy now. The other one sounded a bit louder, maybe a little bit brighter. Maybe that's why it sounded a bit louder. But they sound pretty close. But there's still plenty of differences. Such cool guitars. I don't know. Hopefully you get a kick out of this. Kind of a bit of fun. You know, we learned a bit more about pickups because I went and opened my Yap too quickly last video and left too many holes. So hopefully I've filled the gaps in on that and gave a better picture of you know, how pickups work and how tone is generated. It's not just in the pickup, it's not just in the guitar, but a lot of it does come from the guitar. Like that's going to give you the character, you know, and the pickup kind of filters it. It's kind of like if you have a, let's grab a singer. Let's go with Celine Dion. She's Canadian. It's like you have Celine Dion, right? She has her own voice and she sings into, let's say, an SM58, some kind of condenser mic and some kind of ribbon mic. I don't really know my mics very well, especially not for vocals. I know like the Royer 121 and an SM57, you know, when put on the speaker like that, that's kind of the Nashville standard. But it'll still sound like Celine Dion in every track she sings, using a different mic in each one. But there will be different colorations and EQs and filtration. I don't actually mean filtration, but like it's going to affect and color the sound, but it'll still be Celine Dion in every single one. Or let's say Lane Staley, you know, when he probably used all kinds of mics. And whether he's using a cheap, even an SM57 knockoff or a ribbon mic, he still sounds like Lane, but there'll be a different coloration to the tonality of the end result because the mic is picking it up and filtering frequencies different. Kind of like how pickups work. So yes, there's the magnetic part of it, but there's a microphonic part of it too. That's why guys like Paul Reed Smith likes to liken pickups to microphones, because that's sort of what they're doing. So that's a pretty full episode. Thanks again for watching. If you're watching, thanks for coming along for the ride. I hope you got something out of this, and have a good weekend. Hope you had a good Easter last weekend. You know, this week went by real quick because of the long weekend. 4 days, you know, when you try to cram in like 5 days into 4, it's a lot. I had like 7 guitars here. This is one of 7 that I had to work on, you know, making pickups to fill orders, did graphic work, and then I thought, oh shit, I should probably do a video, keep the algorithm up, and you know, just because it's fun too. So have a good weekend. If this is Saturday morning, have a great Saturday, have a great Sunday. We'll find something else next week.